This is the Human Action Podcast, where we debunk the economic, political, and even cultural myths of the days. Here's your host, Dr. Bob Murphy.
Well, Per, welcome back to the Human Action Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let me just say before we jump in that I have a bad cold, as people can hear, and so maybe later I can do some Bing Crosby or something karaoke. That's really the only upside of this kind of situation, but we had Per scheduled, and I don't want to miss this, so that's why we're going to plow through to bring value to you folks. You won't get my germs, but you'll get our insights still. So, Per, I've noticed lately that you've been pushing back against the, let's call it, fear-mongering over AI, artificial intelligence. So you maybe want to, before we dive into the particular arguments pro and con, do you kind of want to just give us a big picture, like what your take is on, you know, how you see what the discussion out there is on this topic and why you felt the need to start pushing back?
Sure. I mean, there are plenty of different confusions really in this discussion. I think when people talk about AI, they think about things like Skynet in Terminator or the HAL or maybe RoboCop or something like that, and that the AI is going to take over control of everything and kill us. And that's almost what it sounds like when Elon Musk, for instance, is out there talking. We're nowhere close to anything like that, and we don't have anything that is even close to a sentient sort of software. So what we have is really algorithms that can do certain things really well. And we even had to change the term, because from AI used to be sort of really intelligent, but artificially so, robots or software. Mm-hmm. Now we're referring to these chatbots as AI. So we even had to figure out a new term for what is real artificial intelligence. We use AGI to talk about that, artificial general intelligence, whereas these AIs that we talk about today are simply just really good at communicating, pretending to be a human in text or something like that.
Can I stop you just for 1 minute here? Let me make sure the listeners get, because I know what you mean because I saw your tweets about this, but let me make sure people aren't getting lost. So what Per is saying is that, you know, AI traditionally meant robots that seemed like there was a human brain inside of it, or nervous system, I guess, and or the computer was alive and things like that, and that was what AI meant, and that was the dream of AI. And now, though, that they have ChatGPT and things like this that we're using the term AI to refer to, there now has been introduced. So this isn't Per's suggestion, like he's reporting on it to us, that now people are referring to AGI, artificial general intelligence, to mean what AI used to mean, because now AI has meant the lower threshold or the lower hurdle of just, oh wow, there's, you know, these computer algorithms can do more than they could 10 years ago, so we're going to call that AI now. Is that a fair summary of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I studied computer science back in the 90s in college, and back then we constructed what was then called decision support systems, or DSSs. Mm-hmm. And they are basically what AIs are today, but we didn't call them AI because AI was supposed to be like really smart things and they could think for themselves and that sort of thing. And ChatGPT, it sort of seems like it's doing that because it can respond to you and things like that. But what it really does is just sift through the internet in a sense and learn how to respond to a certain type of question so that it seems like it's a human responding to it. So it actually makes sense to you when you're chatting with it, but it doesn't actually do a whole lot. And of course, people have a lot of experience of it lying to you as well, because it's just basically taking whatever is out there, and there's a lot of crap out there. So it's going to repeat a lot of stuff that it simply isn't true. There's no way really of making sure that it has the true answer, or whether it is the true answer, which is something that I deal with as a university professor too, because students use this to generate an essay or something like that instead of writing it themselves. So they write an essay that looks really great, but the content might not be correct at all. Of course, the student doesn't know and doesn't even care, just turns it in for a grade. But I have to read the crap and figure out what is going on. Why did the student not read the assignment, or why did the student not read the actual text, or why is he adding this to the answer? But then it turns out, of course, it's an AI.
It's funny. At first, I misunderstood you because you said that, you know, the way these ChatGPT works, it just goes out and sifts through the information out there and puts together what looks like a good answer. And this is what students do. And I thought you meant that's the same process that a student, you meant he literally uses GPT. Like, I thought you were saying that the student doesn't actually think about the material. He just like looks at the study notes and grabs some copy and paste and hands it in. So that sounds like a good essay. So,
well, a student who wants to cheat does that, right?
Yeah.
And the student who uses ChatGPT instead of writing their own essay, they do the same thing, right?
So can we take a minute? So I'm glad that you it doesn't surprise me because I could just tell from your the reason I'm having you on is because it did look like you knew more about like you weren't just coming merely as an economist, just speaking in broad generalities. I could tell that you knew more about the particulars of how this stuff worked. Can you just, to the best of your ability, just kind of summarize how do these things? Because they train them on, like they go scouring the internet, right? And they like, I don't know, they have algorithms that like learning mechanisms or something, and they reinforce. And so it's like when you type in a question, it's just sort of, it's obviously not that there's some little dwarf inside the computer thinking about it and then typing an answer back. It's, and we do have some insight into exactly what the heck is going on. How is it giving you that response? And do you want to just speak a little bit about that, just for the listeners who don't have any idea how these things work?
Sure. So as a general search engine like Google or Bing or whatever has always sort of crawled the internet and tried to categorize and catalogize the content so that they can quickly find an answer to whatever your question is based on whatever is out there. And ChatGPT and these so-called AIs are more advanced than that. So when you chat with ChatGPT, it doesn't actually find a sentence or something online and presents it back to you because that's a sentence that is typically used in the response to your question. What it does is it has been taught or learned itself, in a sense, how to respond to certain types of questions based on the structure of what it's been training on. So it's based on machine learning and not simply just sifting through everything that is out there and taking it at face value. So that's why it can respond to new questions that it hasn't seen before, which is what people are trying out to when they're trying to sort of push ChatGPT to give answer to really strange questions and to say things that it's not supposed to say and whatever. Mm-hmm. People have way too much time on their hands, right? But what it does is it has sort of learned both content and structure of how to communicate in response to certain types of questions. So that's why if you ask it to provide a summary of a book, if it's read that book or if it's seen that book, it can sort of quickly go through and produce a summary that seems like a summary of the book. And I did that for my primer, for instance, in the beginning. And it looked at a pretty nice summary of my book. It was just that it added stuff when it couldn't find the exact answers. It just added stuff to fill in the gaps that are typically the case in books with such titles that are on economics, right? So it added that, he's also talking about supply and demand curves and equilibrium and things like that. And of course, that's not the case at all. I don't talk about that, but it added those things because those should be the case in these answers.
So that was a plausible bluff on the machine's part.
Yes.
Just like I said, just like as if a student who hadn't actually read your book was asked to summarize it and knew what the title was, that might, understandably throw it. Oh, there's supply and demand curves, of course. Yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. The thing that before we get, again, I just want to kind of lay the groundwork here before we get into the really interesting stuff like, are we going to lose our jobs and that thing? Where I think, by the way, is ChatGPT just a particular brand name, or is that like the name of the genre? Do you know?
That's a brand name. It's created by OpenAI, which is sort of a consortium that has produced this, and we're now at version 4.0. When it was launched, it was 3.5, so this one is much better. But it's also, Microsoft is part of this consortium and supports OpenAI. And I think Elon Musk was part of OpenAI in the beginning too, but then they had a falling out and whatever else. So ChatGPT 4.0 is part of the Bing search engine. So if you want to chat with Bing, the search engine, instead of just asking it a question like a regular search engine, you can get all these answers. And then it presents also the sources that it uses to provide those answers. So, I mean, it seems like it could be a really useful service, except that, of course, it takes those shortcuts and fills in the gaps where it can't find answers. So it's not really reliable in that sense.
Yeah, so it's because, again, it's, and we're sort of brushing up against philosophical issues here, like could a machine that humans built ever really have consciousness? Some people are going to say, I don't care what it does. No, never. Just like, that's a category error, and other people, can bring up the Turing test or something. And but I think since we do have some knowledge about what it's doing under the hood, there's a sense in which we can say we don't think that that's really thinking right now. Well, even there, I know I'm wandering here, because I know there are materialists who will say, like cognitive scientists, and they'll say, well, gee, if we look under the hood in your brain, Bob, there's just little cells and, neurons and firing synapses and blah, blah, blah. So, if one neuron can't think, then why would a billion? So I guess you're not really thinking either, so I get that. But my point is, though, that it's not, that it plausibly presents responses, and in certain, if you just, for people who are listening to this who haven't played around with it, I would encourage you to do it, because it's probably more impressive than you think it is. Like, you can type in wacky stuff that it's clearly constructing something novel. It's not just going and finding that someone in Bangladesh, some human created the answer and it's copying and pasting it. You could say stuff like, do a gangster rap of Bob Murphy responding to Paul Krugman, but also talking about Dante's Inferno. And it would give you something like almost immediately that is not bad. Like, that does check all those boxes, and like, oh yeah, it kind of, oh yeah, this is the, Dante's Inferno. You can see that influence. So it's impressive, and it seems kind of creative, but also I've seen examples, and you've probably seen them too, where like people ask it basic math questions and they'll get them wrong. So you would think, oh, if it's a computer, surely, arithmetic and stuff, it'll knock out, and no, because it's not even, it doesn't know enough to say, oh wait, this is just a math problem. I'm a computer, I can easily solve that. No, it like uses the same process to generate limericks as it does to generate answers to simple arithmetic problems, and it sometimes is wrong.
Yeah, and that goes to the core of the question, right? Is it really an intelligence if it just blindly repeats stuff, and whatever seems to fit, but has no real reflection on what the content is, right? Is it really an intelligence? Well, I wouldn't say it is. It's just any type of software. It's an advanced software, sure, but is it an intelligence? I don't think so. I mean, I tried to use it in research, since that is what I do. And I at one point there was a quote that I sort of remember that there was a quote that I could use, but I couldn't remember where it was. I could remember who said it. Mm-hmm. So I figured, hey, why not ask the new Bing and its ChatGPT sort of thing, because it's really good at responding to complex questions. Mm-hmm. Not like a search engine where, what is the capital of Bangladesh, but rather that, on what street and this, so you can have all these parameters in the question. So I asked, can you find the quote for me by this person saying something to the fact of this, and show me where it is. And it immediately spat out a quote that was almost too good to be true. It was a little better than I remembered it. And it gave me a reference and everything like that. So I was like, I'm not sure about this. So I clicked the reference, and it took me to a page that, it had a quote by this person, but it wasn't that quote. And then I took the actual quote that it provided me, and I put that in the regular search engine, and it found zero websites or books or anything with that quote. So it made up a quote that would check all the boxes that I had asked for. Mm-hmm. And that by this person, and they'd find the best sort of reference for quoting this person, but it wasn't actually there, and it wasn't this person who said it. And apparently no one said it, at least according to the search engine.
That's a good example to show what you mean, that it's, people might have supposed when you said like that sometimes it just gives you gobbledygook, and like, no, it gives a plausible answer, and by giving it the citation like that, if it were a human that had done that to you, that would be lying. That wouldn't just be like they made a mistake. Like, for them to give a false quote and put quotation marks around it and give you a source and a page number and a link, if that's like a Paul Krugman when he says, "Oh, and according to so and so," and he says the wrong thing, you got to click the link to see no, it's actually the opposite Krugman. So that is interesting, and it actually is even more like Krugman. Like it's not that the person says up and he says down. It's more like he takes them totally out of context, or it's like, well, that's not what the person meant by that. So it's dishonest, but is it a lie? I don't know. Okay, so we've got that established. Well, let me just ask you a big, philosophical one first, and then we can move on to the more economic stuff. So, in your mind, could it be possible that at one day there would be software, whether it's housed inside just a regular computer or inside a robot or whatever, that you would be willing to say, okay, that is intelligence. ChatGPT wasn't it, but yeah, I agree that thing is intelligent.
Well, I think so, but not in the sense that it's an actual human, right? Because that's
it's
also
not going to be a human, but
right,
yeah. So you could say its intelligence
type.
is not the same type of intelligence as humans possess. Sure. That's I guess that's why they say artificial intelligence. That's what that word artificial is doing.
Right, but there's also a discussion on when do these types of machines actually get rights, because they are just as intelligent as we are and that sort of thing. And I don't think we're going to get there. And is it going to be sort of self-conscious and those sort of things? I mean, I think it can definitely pretend, and it can probably, I don't know, believe it too, in a sense, right? But I don't think that software can get there, at least not the way computers are structured today. So I don't think that is possible. We can definitely get something that could fool us, that is good enough to fool us that it is an intelligence. So you mentioned the Turing test, and I think we can get there for sure. But I don't think we're going to be able to create sentient beings, more or less, out of computers. Maybe if we get to the point where we create a quantum computer. But with the computers as they are today, I mean, they're way too structured and way too black and white. So I mean, the computer is, as most people know, it's basically just a power switch. It's on or off. It's 1 or 0, and then are layers of complexity added on top of it in terms of software and things like that. Just rules, but there's hardly ever any case where there's a rule that the computer doesn't really know if it applies, so it just fills in the blanks. That's not how a computer works. It's either it is by the rule and that rule applies, or it's not and it doesn't apply. It's always black and white, and humans don't really work like that. We want to see the world as black and white, but it's more of a continuum, and it's a lot of interpretation going on all the time, whereas a computer is not.
So I just want to point out it's tricky with this, just the vocabulary we're using. It happens in biology too, where people are talking about evolutionary biology and they don't want to attribute, motives or goals to a process that they think lacks it, but yet it's hard to avoid that language. So same thing here. You were saying, it might. What'd you say? I think you said it might think that it is conscious, or it might pretend to be. So no, if it's pretending to do something, then it's got to be conscious, right? And if it would make no sense to say it thinks it's alive, but it's actually not. Because to say it thinks, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah. I agree. Like, wouldn't we have to, like, more strictly speaking, say this lifeless machine that has no internal consciousness gives the appearance that it does, but we doubt that it actually does? Or right. And it certainly wouldn't be fooling us. Yeah.
Right. And it has those processes and everything like that. Yeah. That when you ask it questions, it will seem like it reflects and it has a self-conscious and whatever else, which might be just sufficient for whatever purposes. It might be sufficient for producing a HAL too, to just trap people in a spaceship somewhere or whatever.
Well, in fairness, HAL didn't trap the one guy; it sent him flying off into space.
Yeah, well, true.
So it's okay. I'm sure 99% of the listeners know this, but just in case some don't. So the Turing test was something that Alan Turing came up with, one of the fathers of computer science, is to say that we got to be fair with the machine. That if you are having a conversation with it, like if there's a wall and there's something on the other side, and it's either a computer or a person typing, and you're having a conversation with it on the screen, that if you could not tell the difference, if you thought there was a human behind the screen and then there wasn't, that's we would have to say that thing is conscious. Is that your understanding of what the Turing test is?
Yeah, or at least how it's usually told. I mean, I'm not sure
Right?
if
Yeah,
that's
I actually never looked up like what how did he say it? For all we know, he says
yeah.
something totally
No,
different. That happens a
and I
lot.
think so. And I think ChatGPT, in a sense, it passes the Turing test because a lot of people chat with this chat engine, and it seems just like a person. And you can't really tell if that it's not a person. What you can tell, though, and I mean, one way to really uh, catch students in the act of cheating is that usually the language is too good. So
Hmm.
you can tell, well, wait a minute. It's much like Chinese students who barely speak English tend to turn in papers that are almost perfect English, much better than any native English speaker. And you don't know, are they really good at writing or have they used some other person to do this? And the same sort of feeling you get from students turning in a paper produced by ChatGPT, because it has the same tone throughout. There are no spelling errors, there are no grammatical errors. Uh, and things like that that students always have pretty much. And of course, as a professor, you know your students too. So the students who tend to cheat like this are the students who would have a lot of errors too.
Hmm.
so, so you would be able to catch them because suddenly they turn something in with completely without errors.
Yeah, that happened my first year teaching. A kid turned in a paper that it was so good, and he was not a good student. And I was talking to my wife, and wow, he really. And she said, well, maybe he cheated. And I was like, wait a minute. And I went and just Googled like one paragraph, and yeah, he just totally lived it. He didn't even like try to tweak the words. It was just dumb. Like, this is before ChatGPT. This is back in the day when you just outright just found someone else's paper, and if you were smart, he changed it a little bit. He didn't even bother changing it. And you're right, Per. That's how he got caught. Is because he didn't dumb it down. It was like I just knew there's no way this kid produced this essay. I guess one little thing I'll say though is how I catch the ChatGPT, because I when this thing first came out, I was playing around with it too, doing stuff like are you plotting it to overthrow humanity? All those goofy things. And where what I noticed where it was clearly you could tell pretty fast. So yeah, you would ask it a question, in plain English, and it would give you an answer in plain English that sounded like it was a human. And in my case, I think I did say something like, is there any possibility that whatever this thing was, I gave it its official name, could end up harming humanity? And it said something like, well, no, because I am a tool designed to help humans, and so therefore I couldn't hurt humans. And so then I said, is a car a tool designed to help humans? And it said yes. And and it elaborated, and a car is a blah, 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 gave me the history of a car. And then I said, do cars ever hurt humans? And it said yes. In 2020 alone, there was this many traffic accidents and blah, 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 blah. And so I said, okay, so if a car is a tool that was designed to or to help humans, but sometimes hurt humans, just because, whatever I said, ChatGPT was a tool designed to help humans, why did you say before that it could hurt humans? You see how I boxed it in to show that it was contradicting itself, and it didn't even. Now, in fairness, when I do that on Twitter against humans, a lot of times they don't even get what I'm saying either, and just call me a Nazi. But I'm just saying, it was clear at that point it didn't even get. And then I don't know if this is true or not, but when I was copying and pasting that conversation on Twitter and like, haha, some people said, yeah, it doesn't. It's not like it's having a conversation with you. Each thing you type in, it's answering fresh. So I don't know if that's true or not. Like, it's not like it's evolving, in the conversation with you in the back and forth. And so
It used to be the case. So in the beginning,
Yeah.
it used to be the case that it had basically zero memory of the conversation, or just
Okay.
just a few back and forths. But they're expanding that all the time. So
Okay.
now it remembers more and more, and they're going to expand it to remember all of your conversations, which means it's going to be even better at tricking you to think that it's actually a person.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. So anyway, at the point where when I did this experiment, which was, I don't know, 6 months ago, yeah, it was like that was how I could tell, all right, this is not a human, because it didn't even get what I was saying. Again, I should say it's not an intelligent human. There are plenty of humans on Twitter that also respond like that when I try to catch them and say, well, wait a minute, you said, 2 posts ago this. Okay, so why don't we leave that now? Let's get into the economic stuff per se. So what do you, obviously, new technology, oh, wow, it's going to do all this stuff. The fear is it's going to throw a bunch of humans out of work, so we need to slam the brakes on this and consider it. So what's your response to that?
Well, I mean, it's the same as always, I think. I don't think people will always say that, oh, this is different this time, right? And yeah, AI, whether we get to actual AI, AGI, or if this just this chatbot or whatever, yeah, it's going to change things. Of course, it's a revolution in that sense, but it's going to change things just like the spinning jenny did in the UK, and or like the automobile did, and things like that. It's going to change what types of jobs we need human beings to do. So I think for ChatGPT, it could probably be really good at, say, customer service. When people, I always prefer to chat with a real human being rather than with a system, because the system is always stupid and it always boxes me into these alternatives. And I'm like, I want neither of these. Let me talk to someone, right? And ChatGPT could be connected with the actual software so that it can actually do what I want it to do according to whatever rules. So it can replace customer service people, perhaps, things like that. So yeah, it will cause a transition for sure. And I think it's capital, just like any other invention. It's going to replace labor. It's just as capital replace labor, because it can do certain things, simple things, better than humans can do. So humans are sort of released to do something else, and it's going to cause some unemployment in the beginning anyway, but it's going to cause a lot of more prosperity in the longer term.
And when you say can do simple things, it's, and I know you know this, I'm just clarifying for the viewers and listeners, that because some of those simple things could be like, solving a calculus problem or brain surgery, or really what I know that what they're using, I think already is diagnostics. Like, it's like so they're calling them expert systems. So, they train the computer, they'll show it thousands and thousands of MRIs or X-rays or whatever, and then give it the right answer and say, oh, there's a tumor in this one. No, there's not a tumor, or this is benign, and this is, and train it up that way. And then, so when a new patient comes in that it hasn't been trained on, it's better than the average doctor at spotting, looking at the results, and so that frees things up. But if you asked it, go make me a cup of coffee, it wouldn't be able to do that, because it's trained on a very particular thing.
Right. So very, very specialized tasks or or operations. Yeah, it can do, and potentially bigger operations too. But it's not going to be an actual human being. So I mean, even in human action, Mises has a discussion on labor being the least specific of all factors, because we can do pretty much anything, and that's the whole point of capital is to replace human beings and improve the productivity of human beings by having these tools, whether it's a hammer or an AI. It's going to mean that people can do more, and labor can contribute, or it can produce more in terms of valued output. So in that sense, economically speaking, I don't think AI is a problem at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting you brought the customer service, because already, even without getting into like, super advanced AI, you see that trade-off, that to the extent that they have automated systems, that means on a Sunday night on Christmas Eve, if all of a sudden you got a problem with your credit card and you call the number, like if they've got computers doing it, they can be working. Whereas if it was just humans, they might have the day off or something, or the wait time would be ridiculous because so few people are working at that time. But you're right, and if it's just a routine thing, like you just want to check your balance, or how much room's on my credit card, or when's my payment due, you don't even want to talk to a person. Like, no, I just want to talk, it takes too much mental effort. I'd rather just listen to the robot tell me, okay. But you're right. If you have some weird issue, like this happened to me once, I got money out of the ATM, and I don't even know how this, it was an outside one, so the wind kicked up, and somehow like $100 bill fell back into the dispenser, and it closed on me. And I was like, what the heck? And then I took out more money, and it just locked up. It said, no, this ATM cannot dispense cash right now. Like, it knew something was screwy, but I couldn't get my money out because I was going to try to take out more money, and then, hopefully my 100 was still sitting there. And I went and reported it, and there was not a menu option for, if the wind knocked a $100 bill back into the ATM, press 7. That was not, so I literally what you say is, I need to talk to a human, operator in the thing.
Yeah, because a
Okay.
human can solve the problem, right?
Right, because
And
it's the kind of thing where I need to tell someone the story. They need to like pretend to be me and be like, oh, so what he needs in this situation is that where's the machine? It's not simply that it's just like it needs to be like you to have some empathy to realize, just like if you, I hope this doesn't get me canceled, but like if you get someone on the phone that's a call center from another country, sometimes that's not, like, oh no, because I just know this weird situation I'm experiencing right now that I need the customer, so you're not going to understand what I'm even saying. And not just because of the language barrier, but just because you haven't grown up in the United States and it's a weird situation. You don't know our culture. You're not going to get what I mean, so you're not going to be able to help me. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling. So, okay, so Per, so I can see, someone, again, for folks at home, I'm going to play devil's advocate here just to try to present both sides because I know where Per's coming from. I probably agree with you, but let me just push back. So someone could say, oh, sure, it's going to make humanity as a whole richer, right? Total GDP is going to go way up with this thing. But we're worried about certain segments of the population, particularly like unskilled workers, people, who maybe just like have a certain trade skill. They're not, it's not that they have this well-rounded education, they could just bounce around, but no, they can make a decent living to support a family right now driving a truck. And that's a very respectable, honorable profession. If we get AIs to come in self-driving vehicles, those people are out of work, and you can tell them, oh, go do something else. But the reason they're not doing something, the reason they're driving a truck right now is because that's the best paying job. If they go do something else, maybe they got to take a 30% pay cut. So, there's millions of people like that are going to be hurt, at least for a generation. Maybe their kids will be richer because of the robots or whatever. But, so you're just kind of glossing over that, Per. What would you say to that kind of objection?
Yeah, that would be the most common objection, I think, for sure. And in a sense, it sort of puts people in a box, and it pretends that people are that simple, that they can't do anything else, and they don't want to do anything else, and whatever else, which I think is problematic too, because what we're doing today is nothing at all what people did a couple of 100 years ago. And are they saying that we're different types of people? No, we're not. It's just that we've learned to do different things, and we've been influenced by different things. So I think that is sort of condescending in a sense. But I also think that some standardized things need to be done by machines as much as possible, because that means that we have a much lower cost in producing those. What that also means, though, is that the same type of service, but offered as a specialized service, becomes much more sought after and much more valuable. So we see this in for instance, cheese production, which I agree, it's not like driving a truck, but it's pretty standardized too. A cheese is a cheese. But you have two kinds of markets at the same time now. You have standard cheese that are in rectangular shapes and whatever else, and they're produced basically by machines. I know there are cows involved too, but after you have the milk, it's by machines, and basically the humans don't do much at all. And then you have artisanal cheeses, which are handmade, handcrafted, and they have special flavors and special shapes and whatever else, and people pay a whole lot more for those. So it's not the case that we don't have any human being producing cheese anymore because there are machines. No, we have standard cheeses produced by machines because that makes those cheeses so much more affordable and less costly. And then we have artisanal cheeses that could speak to people's very specific wants and desires. And those are made by people because they can target to whatever the customer segment specific taste is like. And I think we can see this with driving trucks too, that yes, standard deliveries between, say, Walmart Supercenter and their warehouse, yeah, you don't need a human to do that. And I don't think there are plenty of humans who think that that is a very, very fantastic thing to do. And it's really something they always wanted to do. But you can have specialized transportations, or, well, these services don't exist yet, so I can't really tell you exactly what they're going to be. But you have all these other niches where people can, with driving a truck and doing it as a human being, figuring out a certain solution that is not standardized and that a system can't do. And those will still be wanted, and those will still be needed. And that's where whoever really, really wants to drive a truck for a living, they can go there. And as a result, we have these more specialized services that are more valued because, well, they're specialized. And then we have the standard services that are basically automatically provided to us.
Yeah, and I was even just thinking of my own challenge there, and some of the, in addition to everything you just said too, that it's, for one thing, at some point, then we could argue about when should they allow self-driving cars on the roads, and I would say, well, in a free market, the road owners would be the ultimate ones to make that call. So it's not like we have to, as public policy, figure that out. But surely at some point, self-driving cars will get in fewer accidents than the typical human-driven car. And so when you want to talk about like the impacts on people, or like, oh yeah, it's not good if you're the guy driving a truck and then you lose your job and you got to take a pay cut. But also, if your kid got killed in a car accident, but he would still be alive if there were more self-driving vehicles. Well, that's kind of a big deal too, right? So it's, in other words, it's not merely that, oh, by having self-driving freight, we can lower shipping costs by 12%, and that means that, the cheese on the shelf is going to be 2 cents lower. Some guys, his career's ruined, but at least we get cheaper cheese. That no, it's also we get cheaper cheese and more kids that aren't killed in car accidents. So it's not merely dollars and cents from one to another. And
it's also not 12% probably either. It's probably a whole lot more.
Right. And also too, I'm just thinking like on road trips or whatever, just, you're driving to Florida for vacation or something, to be able to flip on the self-driving, in other words, it could be a hybrid thing, not just all or nothing. And then you could like take a nap, for a long stretch of that, instead of having to stay awake and drink coffee and whatever. So yeah, that would be amazing. Okay, what about? I guess we just got a few minutes left here, Per. Let's do the nightmare scenario where. And what I like about a lot of the dystopian science fiction things is it's not that the machine just kind of, quote, turns evil. So like, and I don't think I'm giving any spoilers at this point, but like as they explained in 2010, the movie, what happened with Hal was not that it just, no explanation. It was, they said, oh, he was instructed to lie. And that's what kind of screwed him up because he wasn't programmed to do that. And then also, I believe in the Terminator series, they explain it wasn't just that Skynet was, everything was fine, and then for no reason whatsoever, it just decided to start getting homicidal. It was that, like, its programming said something like, prevent, I forget the exact wording, but the idea was it was told to do something by the humans, and then it realized the one thing that can screw that up is human beings. Like, they're unpredictable, so I need to take them out, and then I can be sure to satisfy what I was programmed to do. So in other words, it wasn't that it violated its programming. It's that it fulfilled what it was told to do in a way that the human programmers didn't anticipate. And that's
what software is, right?
Yeah, right.
That's what software is. It's rules.
Yeah, it's not that, like you said, it's zeros and ones, and it's following the rules. That's almost like it follows the rules blindly. It's too good at following the rules. It doesn't know when. Oh, wait a minute. The spirit versus the law, the letter of the law, kind of distinction. That, oh, wait, I shouldn't follow the rule here because the reason the rule was given to me was for this broader purpose that would actually be violated if I applied the rule here. So I guess that's, to me, the more plausible, where these things get more and more intelligent, and especially like the runaway thing where they can start augmenting their own intelligence and then we're not even involved. They just get super smart and then if it just turns out that whatever their objectives are, it decides, yeah, there's too many people, then we're in trouble. So what do you think about, we've got a few minutes here. What do you think about that sort of scenario?
Yeah, I think that is the doomsday scenario. It's not that we're suddenly going to have a sentient software and it's going to, just like us, be a little bit evil and then go on its own adventures and kill off people. That's not what's going to happen. Instead, what is going to happen is that we're going to have some idiot who produces a pretty smart software with all kinds of rules and exceptions and all this stuff, right? And connect that to a weapons system, and then use that against people, whether it's defense to use in war, or if it's like robotic cops, or what are they called, the digidogs that they're going to use now and everything like that. The problem there is that they are going to follow rules and they're going to follow orders exactly. Right? And Caitlin Johnstone had a piece very recently where she talked about those digidogs and things like that a real dog can be trained to be a nasty animal, but it's still an animal, and a human being definitely has sort of a moral compass and can refuse to follow orders. No, I'm not going to shoot into the crowd, right? That's usually what happens when a regime falls and crumbles, that it orders people to shoot everybody and kill everybody, and people go, no, wait a minute, I can't do that. But a machine following rules, and the rule is follow order, well, it's going to shoot people. It's not going to say, no, wait a minute, that's not ethical. So that sort of doomsday scenario, I think, is definitely possible. And it's also easy to avoid. That is, don't use this type of software with weapons and with defense rockets and rocket launchers and things like that, or replace police dogs with robots and whatever else. But use it only for productive ends. So the same technology that is used in police dogs that will, I don't know what they will do to people, but I guess neutralize the threat in some sense, whatever that might be. Well, those dogs can also go into houses where there's gas or whatever else and find survivors. And that sort of thing is very productive. That's what they should do, not be used instead of humans to try to quash a protest or get rid of people who politically disagree with the regime or whatever it might be. I mean, in those cases, this type of software will cause devastation and death. And I agree with that, but it's not because the software itself is sentient and is thinking about it and thinks, oh, humans are terrible people. But we're going to get something. And I think this might be the case if you connect it to things like climate change and things like that, and you instruct the software to, say, shut down power grids based on usage and things like that, and then you have procedures and algorithms to help it learn, quote unquote, what the problem is. It can sort of track who is using more electricity and whatever else and shut them down because that will save the climate more. Well, then that sort of software can also take a next step and say, well, this area here with plenty of hospitals, if we just shut that down, then that's going to be much better because they use a lot of electricity. Well, no. A human would prioritize differently. They would say, well, an office building, fine, you can turn that off if it needs to be turned off. But a hospital, not a good idea, right? And that sort of software can also make the decision, well, why don't we just shut down the turnpike now for a couple of days because that will be less pollution. Yeah, well, that might not be a solution because the reason people are on the turnpike, the reason we have traffic is that there's more value in that than the alternative. But following rules blindly in this way that a software does, that's going to cause a lot of problems, and it's going to be very, very, very costly. And of course, it is the central planner issue, right? That with these rules, someone have to decide on these rules and decide on how to prioritize between them, which means the software and whatever the software is connected to is going to execute based on this one will. Much like Mises is talking about socialist calculation, it's one will that will be executed using all of these systems that are connected to this bunch of routines, really, this bunch of software calculations. And that's what's going to happen. And it doesn't matter what people really want and what people really value. So it could really be a way of getting rid of the market completely, by which I mean getting rid of consumer sovereignty and getting rid of value creation. And that's, of course, terrible. And that's where the politicians want to go too, of course.
Yes, well, that's a comprehensive answer, and I think some sobering thoughts indeed. And I'm glad, though, you did have some specifics there, Per, as to, this. Yes, there's potential threats here, and here's how we could at least mitigate against them. So thank you, Per, for your time, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next time. And until then, just watch out for those Terminators.
Check back next week for a new episode of the Human Action Podcast. In the meantime, you can find more content like this on Mises.org.